What I'm going to do this evening is give you some ideas, some concepts that you're going to be able to use to transform your ability to create, achieve, attract more of what you want in your life. And this is going to be a 4-week training. So I'm going to give you some concepts this evening to get us started, and then in subsequent weeks we'll zero in and kind of drill down a little bit more into each of those concepts. And the purpose is to transform your ability to get what you want. So I'm looking forward to it, and I'm sure you are too. As Clay mentioned in his introduction, I'm a former professor of communications at Capilano University. I was working for them actually in China. They have a couple of programs in China, and I ended up in China working for them. I was there for 4 years, which turned out to be a great experience for me. I got married there. So lucky for me, it worked out great. I'm the author of this book, as he mentioned. I've worked as an executive coach, personal empowerment trainer, and the thing I've been doing probably more than anything else is researching into consciousness. And we're going to be talking a lot about consciousness this evening. As a communications professor, there's different kinds of communication. You know, this is what you might call small group communication. There's mass communication, you know, television, radio, and newspapers. There's interpersonal communication, which is what happens when you sit in a coffee shop with your buddy and have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and talk about your weekend. But the area that I specialize in is called intrapersonal communication. So intra means inside, like intravenous, you know, inside a vein. So intrapersonal means the communication that we have inside ourselves. So it's the way we talk to ourselves. It's the way we tell ourselves things mean. It's the images that we have. It's the feelings that we have in our bodies. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight and subsequent nights. And I'm going to be giving you some pretty powerful tools to do some things which people who don't know this information and don't have these tools might consider to be impossible. Things like changing your past, experiencing your future in advance, those kind of things. Welcome. And so really what we're going to be conveying in this series of workshops is a toolkit. So I'm going to give you a bunch of tools. And like any tools, when you learn how to use them, then you can use them for different things. If you don't have the tool, like if you have to loosen a screw, for example, and you don't have a screwdriver, then what do? You know, you try and use a knife or you use a nail or something, you might break your nail off. So by having these tools, you can do things that people who don't have the tools simply can't do. So I'm sure you're going to find this pretty exciting. Now, what I'd like to do, I think before we get into this journey that we're going to go on over the next 4 weeks, I'll give you a little bit of background of where I'm coming from and how I ended up in this position. And basically, my story starts, I suppose, when I was 10 years old. I had a dream. And in that dream, I saw myself at the age of about 32 or 33. And it was an experience like I was in a helicopter and I was kind of looking down at myself. And because I was high up, you know, I could see sort of into the past a little bit, and I could see off into the future in the 30s and 40s and 50s. And I had a very strong sense of what my life was going to be about. I knew that I was going to be writing, I was going to be traveling, I was going to be teaching, I was going to be helping people live more successful lives. And I also had a sense of who I was going to marry. I can talk about that later, perhaps. But I found this very intriguing because the experience I had of tapping into the future is supposed to be impossible. That the idea of getting information from the future is supposed to be something that's impossible to do. And yet it happened to me. And as I got into my early teens and my later teens, some of this information, some of these ideas that I saw in this vision or this dream started to come true. And so what I did was I started 2 lines of research for myself when I was in my early and mid-teens. And the first thing that I did, the first line of research, had to do with time. And what I wanted to find out is, how is it possible to get information from the future? Because that's supposed to be impossible. And as I looked into this, I started looking in different places, like in the Bible, for example. There's prophets, they can foretell the future. And psychics, Nostradamus, and people like that. And most of us know, or most of us have in our family, Aunt Jenny, who can read your tea leaves or do your cards or whatever and tell you stuff that's amazing, right? So there are certain groups of people that are considered to have this talent or this skill or this ability, but I thought, well, that doesn't really apply to me because I'm not a prophet. And I'm not a psychic, and I'm not a clairvoyant or whatever. What happened to me, I thought, is just an everyday normal occurrence. If it happened to me, it must happen to lots of people, but other people just don't notice it, perhaps. So the other line of research that I was working on was success, because I was supposed to be teaching people about success. So I started reading all these books, Think and Grow Rich, and The Power of the Subconscious Mind, and Psycho-Cybernetics, and a lot of books that I'm sure people in this room have read. And so I was compiling all these different ideas and different information about what it takes to be successful, and of course there were certain commonalities, certain principles that everybody recognizes as the principles of success. And so I got into my 20s, and by the time I was in my early 20s, my life was a complete mess. I had assumed that since I was going to be teaching people about success and supposed to be a successful writer and traveling around, that my life was going to be easy, but didn't turn out that way. So when I was in my teens and early 20s, I was nervous. I stuttered so much I wouldn't talk to anybody. I would never tell a joke. I would never engage in conversations really, except maybe one-on-one, because 2 or 3 or 4 people would just make me nervous, and I'd start to stammer and stutter. So I got to the point when I was about 20 years old that I just wouldn't talk to anybody. And I was incredibly nervous. And when I was in college, I was 20 years old, and the teacher asked me to stand up in front of the room one day and read something, and I just refused to do it because I knew I was going to make a mess of it. And the teacher, of course, he didn't know that I stuttered. He just thought I was being obstinate. So he sent me to the dean's office, and I ended up getting in an argument with the dean, and I ended up quitting school, quitting college when I was 20 years old, because it was just too embarrassing and too painful for me to do that. So when I got into my mid and late 20s, some of these things that I had seen in my 30s in this dream started to show up in my life. And sometimes they showed up with a little bit of a twist, not exactly what I had expected. But by the time I was 27 years old, 28 years old, my life was in such a turmoil. I just got fired from a job. My wife had left me, or my girlfriend at least, that I was living with left me. And so I had no money, no job, no prospects, no confidence. And yet I was supposed to be destined to be this speaker and writer, So I thought, I got to do something to change my life here. So I was living on EI, and I took my last EI check, which was $750, and I heard about a seminar in Mind Power that I enrolled in. I went to see this introductory talk, and I decided that I needed something to change my life, and this Power of the Mind seminar was it. So I was going to enroll in this seminar, and I took my last EI check, and I paid $750 for this course. This was in 1978, I think, 1978, 1979. And because I was desperate to get some results, and because I didn't have any money left, I decided I was going to use this course, and I was going to do these exercises that I was taught in this course. The way the course was set up was they give you a series of 26 different visualization exercises. And you were supposed to do them 20 minutes a day, every day for 6 months. And I decided that I was going to do that. And so that's what I did. Every day, 20 minutes, I sat down. I did this series of visualization exercises. And at the end of the 6 months, my life was so changed and I felt so different that I decided to do it for the next 6 months. So I did it again. I went through the whole course again. And I'd spent basically a year doing this series of 20-minute visualization exercises. And by the end of the year, I had learned some techniques, which I'm going to teach you tonight, very, very similar techniques. I started teaching people some of these principles, and I started doing some public speaking in Vancouver, where I was living at the time. And I opened up a little success coaching business. And starting in about 1980, I started to make my living as a public speaker and as a success coach. And over the next 6 years or so, I was invited by various companies, the Jimmy Pattison Group you're probably aware of, and Royal LePage Real Estate, and Realty World, and some large companies. They actually took me to 17 different cities in North America to do some training for their staff. And my little success consulting business in Vancouver, I had over a period of 6 years, I believe, I counted one day from 1980 to about 1986, I had 10,000 one-on-one personal coaching clients, all of which were very successful, teaching them the principles which I'm going to be teaching you now in the next 4 weeks. So these things are very, very powerful. And around that time, I wanted to put this into a book. So I started to write a book, and I realized I didn't have enough education. I couldn't explain what it was I was trying to explain. I'd learned so much, and I'd experienced so much, that I decided I should go to school. It had been 20 years since I quit college. And so I went back, I enrolled at UBC, and I started working on this book. And I studied philosophy and linguistics and psychology and a lot of other things, and eventually graduated in 1990, and I started working on this book, and I started going back out and doing some more business consulting and earning money doing that. And so the reason that I'm telling you this story is that it's possible to transform your personality. It's possible to transform your life by using some of these principles. These are principles that a lot of you have probably heard before and may be using or may have used sporadically, but by and large are not using them on a regular basis. So one of the things that I'm going to be showing you tonight and subsequent nights is a very specific series of thought exercises. I'll explain how you do those, and they will have the effect of transforming your brain, transforming your thinking, transforming the way you see the world. So since we're talking about success, we're going to be cracking the success code. So what is success? Somebody give me a definition of success. Any volunteers? Freedom, okay, freedom. Happiness, yeah. Recognition, okay. Achieving your goals, yeah, yeah. Living your life fully, okay, yeah. Following your dreams, yes, following your dreams. Anybody else have any ideas? Able to make choices, okay. So as we can see here, a lot of people have different concepts of what success is. So I'm going to give you a definition. And my definition of success is that basically it's a process. Now the word success, it comes from the same family as the words succession and successive. You know, successive steps, right? I'm taking successive steps here. So the idea of putting one foot after the other in a series of steps, that's embodied in this idea of success. So it's a process of transforming your ideals and your goals into physical reality. And probably the best definition of success I ever heard is one from Earl Nightingale, which some of you may have heard. And he said, success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. So there's a couple of ideas carried in that definition. One is it's progressive. It's the realization, which means to make real. So progressively realizing your worthy ideal. So worthy means it's something worthy of you. It's important to you. And an ideal means it's a concept. It's an idea in your head. So literally, it's a process of systematically doing a series of things one after the other to transform your dreams and your goals into physical reality. That's what I mean by success. Now, what about code? What's a code? Anchor, what's a code? Set of rules, yeah. Set of rules. A combination, yeah. Combination lock, like a bank code or something like that. So again, the idea of a kind of a sequence, right? Like, for example, here we have a code. It's called phone number. This is my phone number, 778-977-0260. If you dial that number, then my phone rings. If you dial 778-977-0620, oops, wrong code, guess what? You don't get me. You get somebody else. Anthony Hamilton? No, never heard of that guy. So again, this idea of having a combination or having a sequence of things that you do that opens the vault or opens the door for you is, again, this idea of a success code. What about the order of letters in a word? Here's a couple of words. Are you reacting to life? Or are you creating your life? Now, if you look at the word reacting and the word creating, they're almost exactly the same. They're only different by one letter. I mean, they have the same letters in them. The only difference is that the word creating, the C is in the front, but they're quite a bit different. People who react to life are quite different from people who are creating their life. So this journey that we're going to be going on in the next few weeks, I'm going to give you the ideas and the tools which will enable you to move from being somebody who reacts to the situations that you find yourself in to somebody who creates the situations and the circumstances that you want to experience. So, for example, here's thought number 1 leads to feeling number 1, leads to action number 1, leads to result number 1. If you change that to thought number 2 leads to feeling number 2, leads to action number 2, leads to result number 2. And I have a perfect example of that. I was in Shanghai a couple of years ago. I had decided to move back to Canada. My contract with Capilano University was up, and we decided we were going to be coming back to Canada. So I needed a couple of airline tickets to get us all back to Canada, my wife and her son, my stepson, who's now in grade 12, and myself. So I needed some tickets to come back to Canada. So I'm walking through the Shanghai airport, and I saw this thing out of the corner of my eye, and it said something about free tickets. And so I looked at it, and it said, win free tickets. So my first thought was, some kind of promotion, you know. So I walked, and I took a couple of steps, and I thought, wait a second, that's not very smart. I should at least go and check it out. So I went back, and I looked at it, and it said, put your email address in this box, and you will be entering into a draw that will give you an opportunity to win 2 free business class return tickets from Shanghai to any city in North America, any city in America. So I thought, had thought number 2, which was, well, why not? So I put my email address in the box, and of course I wouldn't be telling you this story except for the fact that about 3 months later I got an email saying, congratulations, Mr. Hamilton, you won 2 free business class tickets returned from Shanghai to any city in the U.S. More than $10,000 worth of tickets. Just because I changed my thought. I changed my thought from, crazy to, why not? You know? So that's an example of what I'm talking about when you recognize what you're thinking, and when you change your thoughts, you can change your results. Leona? Why does the what? Oh, because the thought leads to a feeling. The thought comes first. No, I would say the thought comes first. Yeah. So, but, what I'd ask you to do maybe is save your questions to the end. We can talk at the end, but we're on a bit of a timeline. So write that question down. I'll be happy to talk to you about it later. But as we get more into this, I think you'll understand where I'm going with it. So what I'm going to ask you people to do right now is to make a decision. A decision is a very specific mental act. So what I'm going to ask you to do is make a decision right now that you're going to use the information in this series of trainings that we're doing to make a difference in your life. Just say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to listen to Anthony. I'm going to try these thought exercises that he's going to give me, and I'm going to try it. I'm going to experiment with them. So decide right now that you're going to use these principles and techniques to create a positive shift in the quality of your life and in the quality of your business. Everybody made that decision? Yeah? Congratulations. So it's all in the mind. It all has to do with the mind. Now, this is not necessarily a new idea. Here's a quote from the Buddha. This is probably 2,500 years old, and he says, "We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make our world." Now, what you're going to realize over the next few weeks is that this is literally true, that your thoughts literally create your world. And we're going to be experimenting to see how, in fact, we can do that. Here's a couple more quotes. Here's one from Albert Einstein. He says, "Problems cannot be solved at the same level of thinking which caused them. To solve them, we have to move to a new level of thinking." So I'm going to be giving you a new level of thinking here over the next little while. And when you make that little shift and you look at your life from a different angle, what you find out is it's absolutely true. You can solve problems, you can do things from one level of thinking that were simply impossible from the old level. Here's a quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes. He says, "A person's mind, once stretched by a new idea, never regains its original dimensions." And this, of course, is what happened to me. And when I took this workshop in 1975 that I mentioned, or 1976, that after doing this series of exercises, I learned some things and experienced some things that literally changed my mind, stretched my mind, and it never went back to its former shape. This is a quote I took from the Times Colonist newspaper just about a year ago, January 19th, 2011. This is a philosopher from the University of Toronto. His name is Derek de Kerkhove. He says, "The biggest transformation of the decade will come when people realize their thoughts can create matter." In medieval times, it was called magic. Now it's achieved through technology. So what he's saying here is that your thoughts can create physical matter. Now, the simplest example and the easiest example of that I can think of is this meeting right here. This is a physical event. These tables are physical, I'm physical, you're all physical, physical paper, physical projector, physical cameras. All this stuff is physical. So this is a physical event in your life. You're going to be able to remember this. I'm sure over in the coming years, you're going to look back on this night as a pivotal night in your life. And yet it began with a conversation that I had with Clay in January. And we discussed putting on this series of workshops. So this is literally what we're talking about, is taking your thoughts and making them physically real in your life. Anybody ever seen one of these? Robert, you've seen one of these, right? Anybody ever use one? When I was in high school, we had to use these, right? This is a slide rule. I mean, this is a couple of sticks sliding back and forth. This was the technology that we used to use. Well, now we have a little better technology. How many people have one of these? iPad. Does the same thing, right? I mean, part of what it does is it calculates. A little more accurate, perhaps, than the slide rule, and does a few more things than the slide rule does. Now, as big as the revolution in technology has been in the last 15 or 20 or 30 or 40 years, I mean, when was the PC invented? 1973 or something, right? Not that long ago, you know. And so there's been almost an equal or maybe even a greater revolution in our understanding of what thinking is and how the mind works. Here's a quote from a writer named John Assaraf. And have any of you seen the movie The Secret? Yeah, he was featured in that movie. He says in one of his books, a book called The Answer, which is a great book, he says neuroscientists have estimated that 98% of what we know about the brain we've learned in the last decade. So 98% of what we know about how the brain works we've learned in the last 10 years, roughly. Now this book I think was written in 2008, so he's talking since about 1998. Even more startling, he says, more than 80% of what we thought we knew about how the brain works has turned out to be false. So what we thought we knew about the brain, up until quite recently, was wrong. Now, some of the stuff that I studied in university and some of the stuff that you studied in university in terms of psychology and how the brain operates, it's completely backwards. In 1995, there was a discovery made using something called a functional MRI, which gives scientists the ability to look inside people's brains. And what they've discovered is that your brain continues to grow new neurons and form new neural connections all your life. And not only can you grow new neural connections and change the way your brain is hardwired, but you can do it by thinking. So now I realize why this series of exercises I learned in the mid-'70s had such a profound effect on me and my life, because I literally changed my brain. I changed the way I was wired up. Here's Barack Obama. He says, we don't fear the future, we shape the future. Which I think is a great idea, shaping the future. Brian Tracy, we all know Brian Tracy. He says the best way to predict the future is to create it. And Jan Asaraf again, he said, things don't arbitrarily happen to you. Events in your business are the reflection of your thoughts, the echo of your own actions, and the thinking behind them. So the things that happen to you in the world, the circumstances and the situations and the experiences that you have in the world are a reflection of what's going on inside you. And here's one of my quotes here. Things don't happen to you, they happen from you. In a similar way that this projector here is showing something on the screen that we notice, in a similar way, our mind does something like that. Now here's another quote from a writer from the New York Times. His name is David Brooks. He says, the most important power we have is the power to select the lens through which we see reality. So reality, what's reality? Well, there's different ways of seeing it, right? People look out in the world and they see different things. You've seen this picture before, probably, right? Everybody see the old woman? Everybody see the young woman? So if you ask, is this a picture of a young woman or is it a picture of an old woman? Well, the answer is neither, and both. It depends what you see. It depends how you look at it, right? So it's the same thing for us. Of course, there's only two things in here, or maybe three things. There's an old woman, there's a young woman, and there's just a bunch of lines. But of course, when we look out into the world, there's all different kinds of things that we see. What about this one? What do you see here? A duck. Or a rabbit, right? Yeah, actually it's rabbit duck. Both of them are delicious, by the way. Rabbits and ducks, they're both delicious. So again, how are you seeing reality? Are you seeing it half empty or are you seeing it half full? So what we're going to notice after this evening, we'll do some exercises tonight, but certainly as we get over the next 3 or 4 weeks, when you start to do these thought exercises and you start to feel, and you'll feel the changes happening inside your mind and inside your brain, you will start to notice things you never noticed before. You'll see opportunities that you never noticed before. Some things might disappear that you've been looking at for years. You might find that they disappear. So, of course, different people have different views of reality. Some people believe in angels and some people don't. Some people believe in luck. Some people don't. Some people believe in talent. Other people say there's no such thing as talent. It's all hard work, right? Other people believe in coincidence. Other people say no coincidence. It's all law of attraction. Some people believe in fate. Other people don't. So the truth is, if you believe in angels, you'll see the effect of angels, and angels will have an influence on your life. Ask anybody that believes in angels. They'll say, yeah, I get lots of evidence, right? Somebody who doesn't believe in angels doesn't have that experience. Does this look familiar to anybody? Somebody on a bit of a treadmill here? Anybody ever feel this way? Anybody feel this way now? So what we're going to cover here over the next little while is how to get instant results, which is great. You're going to get instant results tonight. And how to turn those into long-lasting changes in your life. So we're going to be experiencing how to get some instant results and also how to turn those results into long-lasting shifts. So basically we're going to be covering 4 things during this 4-week process. This 4-week journey, as Clay described it. The first one is going to be the law of attraction. A lot of you are familiar with the law of attraction, so we're going to be talking about that. I'm going to be talking about the mind-time connection, and the mind-time connection is the subject of my book. We're going to be talking about neuroplasticity, which is this discovery that I'm talking about that took place in 1995, roughly. And this is what John Assaraf was referring to as well. And we're going to be talking about imprinting, which is this specific technique that I'm going to teach you to imprint these new thoughts, these new beliefs, these new attitudes onto your mind. So in terms of the law of attraction, we're going to look at how it works. We're going to talk about how to stop attracting what you don't want, how to get it to work for you, how to increase your level of success, how to get instant results, how to maintain those results long term. And I'm also going to be talking about 2 keys to personal mastery. So how does the law of attraction work? Well, here's the definition. I attract into my life whatever I give my attention, energy, and focus to, whether it's positive or negative. So basically, when you focus on something, you will attract more of it. And if anybody has ever bought a new car, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because after about 3 weeks, it seems like everybody has bought one of these cars and everybody's driving the same car that you bought, right? And the reason for that is simply because you have imprinted on your consciousness the shape and the color of that car. So that has sunk down into your unconscious mind, into your subconscious, and there's something in your brain called the reticular activating system. And the reticular activating system is part of your reptilian brain. It's designed to warn you of danger, or it's designed to warn you of things that are important to you. This is the reason why when you're in a crowded bar with music playing and a couple of sports channels going and people laughing and carrying on conversations, and somebody walks in the room and mentions your name, you can hear it. Because your name is the most important word to you. So when somebody mentions your name, you hear it, even though you're in a crowded situation. So that's the reticular activating system. It was the reticular activating system that pointed out to me that there was a couple of free tickets going on draw in the Shanghai airport, because I was thinking about these tickets. I had decided I was going to get tickets, and I was just making some decisions about which ones and when and what airline and that sort of thing. So I was thinking tickets to North America. And my reticular activating system recognized that that was an important idea for me. And when I was walking through the airport, out of the corner of my eye, it caught my attention. If I hadn't been thinking of that, I probably wouldn't have seen that little sign. So this is more or less how the law of attraction works. It's, first of all, you observe what you receive, and then you look at what's in your life. So if you have problems in your life, you observe those. While you're observing those, you're sending out a vibration, either positive or negative. And the law of attraction responds to the vibration that you're sending out. As a result, you notice more and more problems. And all of us know people like this, right? People that complain, they have problems, and it seems like they always have problems. And you solve one problem and they have another one, You turn that around and start noticing opportunities, and of course, we all know people that are great problem solvers, and they find lots of opportunities. So it's the same cycle, and this is basically what you call non-deliberate attraction. Now, this is something I learned from a fellow named Michael Lozier. Some of you might know Michael. He lives in Victoria. And when I was in Shanghai, I decided that I was going to take some training from him when I came back to North America. So I used that ticket from Shanghai to fly right to Phoenix, Arizona, and I spent 4 days with Michael, and that's where I studied his law of attraction technique, and I became a certified law of attraction trainer using his system, and this is one of his ideas. And it's a great way to look at it. So people who are not attuned to how they can change their thinking and use the law of attraction, this is the cycle that they're stuck in, basically, is that whatever they have in their life, they just get more of it. So when you get in there and you change some of those thoughts and some of those beliefs, then you attract different things. You notice different things. So in terms of the law of attraction, we talk about vibrations. And I think everybody's familiar with that concept of vibration, negative vibration. So things like disappointment and loneliness and lack, sadness, confusion, anger, hurt, stress, those are what we call negative vibrations. Joy, love, excitement, abundance, pride, comfort, confidence, affection, those are positive vibrations. And you can feel those vibrations in your body. And so what we're going to be talking about over the next little while is a lot about thoughts and vibrations. Here's a concept again from Michael Lozier, and this is a great idea. It's called your vibrational bubble. And so your vibrational bubble is basically just a way of thinking about the kind of vibration that you're sending out. So your vibrational bubble is sort of it's like the total of what you're feeling and thinking all the time, right now. So right now we're thinking about law of attraction and vibrations and goals and success. So that's in our vibrational bubble. So basically the vibrational bubble is just a way of thinking about the kind of thoughts and the kind of feelings and the kind of emotions you have going on at any particular time. So, for example, when you're thinking about what you want, if you're thinking about your goals and your desires, then they're in your vibrational bubble. If you're daydreaming about it, it's in your bubble. If you're visualizing about it, it's in your bubble. If you're pretending that you have it, it's in your bubble. If somebody mentions the word and it reminds you of it, it's in your bubble. Notice something positive, then you have a positive vibration in your bubble. Making a collage or a picture board or some kind of a visual impression, like a dream board of the things that you want, it puts them into your vibrational bubble. When you're praying for what you want, it's in your bubble. Celebrating evidence of it, it's in your bubble. So basically the vibrational bubble is just a concept, a way to think about what you have going on for you vibrationally and mentally and emotionally. And it's a great concept. We're going to be talking about it more. But what I'm going to give you tonight is basically some of these big pieces. Now, this concept is fundamental to the whole process that we're involved in right now. The idea is that each of us lives in two worlds. We live in an inner world of thinking and feeling and emotions and vibrations and thoughts and desires and fears, memories and ambitions and daydreams. So the inner world is the world of our thoughts and emotions, and it's private. It's private to us. But we also live in the outer world, and the outer world is physical events, it's other people, it's the circumstances and the situations of our life. And so we live in both of these worlds. We don't live in one world, we live in two. And as we're going to discover over the next little while, these worlds are connected. There's a connection between the inner world and the outer world. And if you think about it, you know, something positive happens. You make a sale, or somebody says to you that they like the way you look, or you get a compliment from somebody. Oh, you got your new shirt on, Peter. You look terrific, you know. So you feel good, right? You feel good. So the fact that the outer world affects the inner world, that's sort of obvious, you know. Somebody criticizes you, gives you a hard time, you lose a sale, your boss calls you in the office and chastises you for making a mistake somehow. You know, you feel bad. So again, you know, the outer world is affecting the inner world. So the fact that your outer world affects the inner world, that's something that people can accept pretty easily. It's not a difficult concept. But what I'm saying is that this connection goes both ways. That if the outer world connects the inner world, then the inner world must be connected to the outer world. And all the work that we're going to do in this program is we're going to be working in the inner world. We're going to be doing things inside with our thoughts and attitudes and beliefs, and we're going to notice, we're going to expect that changes are going to show up in the outer world. This was a big insight for me when I realized this, is that internally, you could describe that in terms of your beliefs. So what I believe is connected to what I perceive. What I see in the outer world has to do with what I believe in the inner world. If Donald Trump were to come to Victoria, he would perceive things that you and I probably don't notice. He would see opportunities for making money, for developing businesses and hotels that you and I just don't notice because of who he is and what his beliefs and what his mindset is. So he would notice things that you and I just don't notice. But what I believe and what you believe and what I perceive and what you perceive in the world are connected, and they both use the same nerves. So when you believe something, obviously that's something to do with your brain. And when you perceive something externally, that has something to do with your brain too. And guess what? It's the same brain. So as you change your beliefs, what happens is you start to notice different things in the outer world. People say, I'll believe it when I see it. Anybody heard that before? Wayne Dyer, a lot of you know Wayne Dyer, I'm sure. He's a very famous psychologist, writer. He says, you'll see it when you believe it. He wrote a book with that title, I think. So you change your beliefs and you start to see things differently. So basically, this is how it works. You have words. Words trigger thoughts. Thoughts trigger vibrations or feelings and emotions, and those have an effect on the results that you get. So for example, if I use a word like dog, everybody knows what a dog is. You all speak English, so you have a concept in your mind now. You have a thought of a dog. Now, if you like dogs, how many people like dogs? So you have good vibrations in your body, right? You like dogs, so you have a good feeling. You have a good vibration about dogs. Anybody here not like dogs? Hate dogs? Afraid of dogs? If you're afraid of dogs, then of course you have a bad vibration. I mean, you may have a picture. When you hear the word dog, you hear the word dog, you're going to have a picture in your mind of a dog or a thought of a dog, but the vibration is going to be negative. It's going to be different. It's going to be fearful. It's going to be something different. And if you look at people who have dogs, chances are excellent that they like dogs. They have good vibrations, good feelings, good memories about dogs. Somebody who's afraid of dogs, who doesn't like dogs, who has negative attitudes and beliefs about dogs, they're probably not going to have dogs in their apartment. As a matter of fact, if they get invited to dinner at a friend's place and the friend says, oh, by the way, I'm looking after a friend's German Shepherd this week, they're liable to say, let's put the dinner off. I'll come next week. Right? So the words affect your thoughts, which trigger a feeling or a vibration, and that will have a result or an effect in the physical world. And now, if we want to turn it around, if we want to get different results in our life, then what do we have to do? What should we look at? What should we change? Yeah, we change our vibration, right? And we change our thoughts, or we change our words. And so what we have is similar to the drawing I put before. We have new words, triggers new thoughts, gives us new vibrations, gives us new results in our life. And that story about my walking through the Shanghai airport is a good example of that. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks is this idea of using specific kinds of words and specific ways of using words that will trigger specific thoughts and specific ways of thinking in us and change our vibrations. So, anybody want to be more successful? You want to know how to create instant success? Okay, let's do that right now. You have a workbook there, and I'm going to teach you this formula for changing your success vibration to bring more success into your life. So the way we do that is you have a sheet in your workbook that's called your past successes. Past successes worksheet. So what I'd like you to do now is take a few minutes and write down 3, 4, or 5 past successes. How do you feel now? Feel better than you did just a few minutes ago? You feel more successful? A little bit? Feel happy? You feel powerful? So that is success. That's what success feels like. And what you need to do now is anytime you want to feel successful, what do? Robert, what do? Exactly. You read over your past successes list, right? So you read your past successes list and you feel successful. Now, I've been using this for years. I've taught it to lots of people. I've even taught it to school kids, and it's an amazing thing. Everybody loves it. Everybody gets instant results from it, and it's a magical thing. I believe that if you have a past successes list of 30, 40, 50 things, it will cure your depression. You won't get feeling down. All you have to do is read your past successes list, and it will remind you of how successful you are, and it will make you feel successful. So this is one of our fundamental techniques. We're going to be using this more. So notice what your attention, energy, and focus is on when you are reading your past successes list. So the law of attraction says you get more of what you put your attention, energy, and focus on. So if you were to sit here now, and if I were to give you 15 or 20 minutes, we're going to take a break in a few minutes. But if you want to write some more on your past successes list, I suggest you go ahead and do it. Because when you're feeling successful and when you're thinking about your past successes, that's the best time to come up with some more ideas of past success. And as you read this list over and as you play around with it, what you'll find is that you feel more successful, you start to think and expect more success, and if you do it on a regular basis, which we're going to talk about, it will become a long-term feeling for you, a long-term shift in your self-image. So here's an affirmation for you. You have a page there in the back of that workbook that's for affirmations, but you can just write it down on your past successes list if you like. But here's some words that you can use, and the words are, I feel more successful now. Now, is that true for anybody? I feel more successful now? It's true, right? Right now. We're talking about now, because you're reading your past successes list. So when you're reading your past successes list, you say, I feel more successful now, and it's true. Now, the number one law of consciousness is this. Whatever is true for you grows. Whatever is true for you becomes just more. Your consciousness is alive, your mind is alive, your thinking is alive, and as you think about the fact that you're more successful, it just grows, and you start to remember more successes in the past, you notice more successes in the present, you anticipate more successes in the future, and you become a more successful person just because you're focusing on your past successes list. Here's another affirmation. I notice more success these days. Now, you notice the words. The first one says, I feel more successful now. That's inner world. That's feelings and emotions. The second one, I notice more success these days. What that means is you notice more success. So you'll notice more success in the world. You'll notice more success with other people. You'll notice more success in your past and in your future just by playing with that past successes list. Here's another statement. I have the power to feel successful anytime I choose. Is that true? It's true, right? See, other people who don't know this, they have to go out in the world and try and do something and try and achieve some kind of win in order for them to change their feelings so they feel successful. Well, we don't have to do that. We work in the inner world, and we have the power to feel successful anytime we choose simply by focusing on our past successes list, telling ourselves, I feel more successful now, and we become more successful people. One of the things that I mentioned in one of the emails, or some of the emails that we sent out promoting this event, is the idea that your power is only one thought away. And this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. If you want to feel more successful, you know exactly how to do it now. All you have to do is think of one of your past successes, and lo and behold, you have the power to transform your feelings and become more successful instantly. So that's how to be more successful. That's how to achieve instant success. That's how to transform your feelings and your emotions and your vibrational bubble instantly. So let's take a quick break. You can play with your past successes list. You can get up and get yourself a bathroom break or have a bottle of water, and we'll come back in about 10 minutes and we'll carry on. Okay, so I mentioned in the beginning that we were going to have four big pieces that we were going to talk about tonight. The first one was the law of attraction. And the next one I want to talk about is what I call the mind-time connection. And this is the origin of my book, Mind, Time, and Power. And basically, what I realized when I had that dream that I told you about, and certainly after I got into these meditation exercises, because after doing these meditation exercises 20 minutes a day for a year, I started to become very familiar with my past. And what I realized was that there was a reason that I had that vision when I was 10 years old. And briefly what happened was I was in a situation, I was in a place in my life where my life simply was not working. And I felt absolutely certain that my past was negative. I couldn't remember anything positive about my past. I mean, school was a bummer. Teachers didn't understand me. I didn't do well in school, even though I was bright. I had trouble with the church, and so a lot of my childhood to me seemed kind of painful. And so when I got to my mid-20s and late 20s, I realized that I had a really negative attitude about my past. But I couldn't remember much about it. I'd blanked it out. So I thought, there's something illogical about this, that I have such a strong belief that my past was negative, and yet I can't remember any details of it. So I thought, I'm going to go back in my memory and see if I can remember any positive experiences. So I was doing these 20-minute daily exercises anyway, so I thought, well, I'll just start looking in my past. So I remember for the first 3 or 4 days, I couldn't remember anything positive about my past. But at some point, I remembered that I used to like playing baseball. And I had a lot of friends. I lived in a small town when I was growing up, and we used to play baseball. So I remember this baseball game, and so I thought, well, the next day I'm going to go back and I'm going to try and remember more about that baseball game. Who was I playing with, and what happened after the game, and what else did we do? And so I went back to that baseball game, and I remembered who I was playing with, who's on first, who's on second. And after a period of about 60 days, I got to the point where I remembered all of those people that I used to play with when I was in my 10th year. I remembered what their names were. I remembered their phone numbers in some cases. I remembered their parents, what their parents did for a living. I remembered their addresses. I remembered the kind of car that their parents drove. I remembered the pets that they had. And to me, it was kind of like taking a rag and cleaning off the dirt off of a painting or something. It seemed like every time I went back to that baseball game and every time I went back to that memory, I could remember a little bit more. And then one day, I remembered that one of my favorite things to do was to climb up to the top of this tree. I lived in Nova Scotia, just outside Halifax, on the Dartmouth side, if you're familiar with that area. And there was a hill with a big tree on the top, and somebody had cut the top of the tree off and built this platform on it. And the platform, might have been 8 by 8 or something. It wasn't huge, but it was certainly big enough for a 10-year-old kid to sit on. And I used to love to go up to the top of that tree and sit on that platform and look at the harbor and see all the ships coming in. And the airport was close by, so I could see the planes coming in. And it was one of my favorite things to do. And I remembered that one day I climbed up to the top of this tree and I laid down on this platform and I was looking up at the sky and the clouds were going by. And I used to love to look at the clouds, and there's a horse going by, and there's a pirate ship going by, and there's an airplane going by. And so I remember that I used to love to do that. And one day while I was lying on that platform on the top of that tree, I fell asleep. And I had this dream. And in the dream, I was on the West Coast, and I was writing, and I was teaching, and I woke up. And I remember that hit me like a ton of bricks. And I realized that that's it. That's it. That's the answer to my question, which is, how is it possible for a 10-year-old person to have so much information about his 32nd year? Because I was 32 when I had that memory exercise. I spent 60 days every day for 20 minutes remembering my 10th year. It totally transformed my feelings about my past. I suddenly realized I had this pretty happy childhood that I had forgotten about. So the first answer the first question that I had, which was why or how is it possible for someone to have information about the future? What I realized was it's because memory works both ways. And memory is not a recording. We tend to think that memory is a recording, like we're recording this video. That's the general model that people have of memory. What I realized was memory is a connection. It's a connection to the past. And because the connection goes both ways, obviously when I was 10 years old, I had all this information from my 32nd year flooding into my mind. So for that brief moment, that connection kind of opened up, and I had that vision or that dream. But it also answered the other question that I had. Remember, I said that I was doing research in two things. One was, how is it possible to get information from the future? The other question was, what does it take to be successful? And I had been reading all these books and studying success principles for years. And one thing that I knew with absolute certainty was that if there's one principle that you need to have in order to be successful, is you have to have a goal. You cannot be successful without goals. As a matter of fact, the very definition of success that I gave you earlier was the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. So having a dream, having a goal, having something that you're trying to achieve or create, that's the essence of success. And what I realized was a goal is a memory of the future. That's the reason that we can achieve our goals. Everybody who has goals automatically is successful by definition. You become successful as soon as you have a goal because you're working towards that end. And you cannot be successful if you don't have goals. If all you have are dreams and fantasies and wishes, you cannot be successful. You only become successful when you decide to achieve a goal and you start working towards it. And Paul Lowe, who is a successful business consultant and writer, I believe he's passed away now. But one of the lines that I heard him say one time really stuck in my mind, and he said, if you don't have goals, you're going to end up working for somebody who does. So it's people with goals that make the decisions, and they run things. So what I realized in that flash of insight, I was living in Vancouver at the time. I was on Kitts Beach doing this meditation exercise, and I realized that that's the connection, is that your mind is connected to the past and the future, and every thought that you have is a connection. So the imagination connects you to the past, we call memory, and it connects you to the future. We call that goals, or we call it a hunch, or maybe intuition. But there's a connection. So your mind is connected to the past and the future, just like your cell phone is connected to every point on Earth. East, west, north, and south, makes no difference. Just like your computer is connected to every place on the internet. And that list of past successes that we just created, to me, that's kind of like a list of favorites. You know, on your computer, you have a list of favorites. You know, your favorite websites. You just click on there and you get a website. That's what the past successes list is to me. It's like a list of favorites. Those are my favorite places, my favorite times in the past. They have that positive energy for me. So the mind-time connection, which is my discovery and that I've been writing about and talking about now for 30 years, it's the essence of my book. Basically what it says is that information flows into your present through the pipeline of the imagination from both the past and the future. So something pops into your head from the past, we call that a memory. Something pops into your head from the future, normally we don't have any word for it. We don't even notice it lots of times. Or we might call it a hunch or some kind of intuition, or gee, wouldn't that be nice if, you know. But the thing is, every time you take a vacation, this part of your mind gets activated. Every time you plan a dinner party, this part of your mind kicks in. And the last time you had some friends over for dinner, what you realize is that as soon as you have that plan, that goal in your mind, you start to decide what you're going to make for dinner, how many people are going to come, what kind of wine are you going to have, what kind of music are you going to play. That for 3 or 4 days or a week before that dinner party, your mind is starting to feed you information. It's, oh, gee, you know, better get some extra chairs, better talk to Marge and ask her to bring that big bowl of hers, you know, so that, because I'm going to need that. So this is what's happening is your mind is connecting to that future event where you're going to have the dinner party, and your mind is starting to feed you information. So one of the principles behind this mind-time connection is that you're always being communicated with from the past and from the future. And the reason that most people don't notice it is because most people don't have goals. 87% of the population, from research that I've done, don't have any goals. They have dreams and fantasies and wishes. You know, they all want to be rich and they want to be successful and they want to be in a perfect relationship. But the people that are goal setters, who set specific, measurable, definite goals, I'm talking about politicians, I'm talking about business people, I'm talking about entrepreneurs, I'm talking about sports figures. They have specific goals and plans that they work on every day, religiously every day, and for those people, they become very psychic and they become very intuitive, and they start to use that information coming from the future as a regular thing. They get used to it. And so will we. As we start to recognize this and we start to appreciate it, what's going to happen with all of us is we're going to notice that our mind starts to communicate with us and say, hey, you have this goal you want to reach? Do this. Read this book. Talk to this person. Call this person. So your present is equally connected to the past and the future. Information flows continuously from your past and from your future into the present. So one connection that you have to the past is your past successes list. Here's Einstein again. He says, imagination is more important than knowledge. Because with your imagination, you can create knowledge. You can create knowledge from the past or from the future. You can get new information from the past if you ask yourself the right questions. And you can get lots of information from the future once you start to set goals. He also said the laws of time and the laws of space mirror each other. So the laws of time, moving through time and moving through space, it's the same laws. Because there is no time and there is no space. There's only space-time. So the laws are exactly the same. And one of the things that I asked myself was, is it possible that information flows through time? Because we know that information flows through space. I mean, we have these things right now crawling around on the surface of Mars. They're picking up information from the surface of Mars and transmitting that information through space to us. So we know all kinds of information about Mars, even though we've never been there. Well, there's something in your mind that does exactly the same thing in the past, which we tend to call memory, and in the future, which we normally don't have a word for. You've seen this movie? So this idea of time travel is an idea that's been around for years. Here's a story, The Time Machine. We've all probably heard about it. H.G. Wells. It's been produced numerous times. I think that classics comic, The Time Machine, is one that I read. And I believe the reason why time travel is so successful, is so ubiquitous, and so many people talk about it. Star Trek, you know, there's Doctor Who, I mean, there's lots of shows on television talking about time travel. I believe the reason that that's so is because it's true. It's a natural function of what it means to be a human being. So that's why it resonates so well with all of us. Here's a way of looking at how our life unfolds. You know, here's a person here, he's in his early 20s maybe, and he's trying to make some decisions about his life. He realizes that he can go his whole life and be a bachelor, maybe get into business and focus on focus on earning his money perhaps, or he can get married. If he gets married, he can have a family, or perhaps he can join the Cirque du Soleil and become a dancer. I don't know exactly what that picture is. But the thing is, this is how our future unfolds for us. And what we have to do is we have to start making some decisions. We have to decide on what our goals are. And the word decide, by the way, comes from the same Latin root as the word suicide or homicide. It means to cut out or to cut away from. So, for example, if you can think of a Roman, he was going to commit homicide. Of course, homicide is a Latin word, right? If you can think of somebody 2,000 years ago, how would they kill somebody? They'd cut them with a knife. So the idea then of cutting away, D means away, so to cut from means to decide. And so if you make a decision about, I'm going to go this way and not this way, what happens is your energy and your attention goes this way, and this part of you simply becomes, in a sense, it's dead. When you decide on doing A rather than B, all your energy goes towards A, and B kind of fades away. It doesn't happen anymore. So B, in a sense, it's killed when you decide on your goals. And this picture here, which I think is a great way to represent the way our life unfolds, because everything is possible. In some sense, everything is possible. We have to make decisions about our careers and our relationships and our health and our diet and where we're going to go. And here's a quote from Steve Jobs. He says, "It's looking forward. You can only connect the dots by looking backwards. You have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever." He said, "This approach has never let me down. It's made all the difference in my life." So when you are looking forward, you don't know what's going to happen. You have to make some decisions. You have to make some decisions based on confidence and courage and faith. It's only looking backwards when you see where you've come that it starts to make sense. So this idea of getting information from time is key. Here's a scientist. His name is Fred Alan Wolf. If you saw the movie What the Bleep Do We Know, he was featured in that. He's written a lot about time travel. He says, "When I write, I realize that I'm really time traveling. The words I write are not just popping into my mind, but they're actually already written down in my mind. And my mind is really a time machine just going ahead into time, bringing the words from the future. Does time travel improve one's life?" He says, "Certainly it does, because time traveling is not a fantasy of science fiction, but a matter of scientific fact. And as such, it has the potential for improving everyone's life. As we become more aware of just what time travel really is, the question of how and why time travel improves our lives will become more and more evident." So this is something from physics, and one of the places that I studied to try and find out about how it's possible to get information from the future is physics. When I was in university, I studied the philosophy of time and space, and I studied Einstein's theory of relativity, and what I realized was, in terms of physics, getting information from the future and having the future actually be a force to cause something to happen in the present is perfectly in alignment with modern physical theory. This is a psychologist. His name is Daniel Gilbert. He works at Harvard University. He wrote a book called Stumbling Upon Happiness, which is a great book. He says, "What are you doing when you're doing nothing at all?" Well, the answer, it seems, is time travel. He says, "The frontal lobe of your brain is a time machine. The mind can move through time in any direction and at any speed it chooses. Time travel is the brain's default mode." So what happens with each of us? All of us now are focused on the present. We're attending this class, you're listening to me, you're paying attention to me, so you're focused on the present. That takes a certain amount of energy to control your focus that way. But as soon as I stop talking, or if you were to get bored or get tired, your mind would be off wandering someplace else. You'd be thinking about last week or next week, or you'd be wondering what you're going to have for dinner tomorrow night. So the default mode for your brain is to be in some other place, either in the past or in the future. So there's been a lot of research lately, just recently, in this idea of mental time travel. So this I find very interesting. It's something I've been talking about for 30 years, but until just the last few years, I didn't know anybody else talking about it. Now the scientists, again, using these MRIs, they've gone into the MRI. They can look inside a person's brain when they're thinking, and what they realize is when you're using your memory or when you're using your ability to think about the future, your brain is basically doing the same thing. That by and large, your brain doesn't know whether it's past or whether it's future. So this is the essence of my book, Healing Your Past, Transforming Your Present, Creating Your Future. And that's, now you understand why it's called Mind, Time, and Power. Because it's about time, it's about the mind, and it's about developing your power to control what your imagination is doing. When you gain some control over what your mind is doing, you develop a tremendous amount of power. So, 2 keys to mastery, both involving time. The first one has to do with changing your brain. Here's a book called Train Your Mind, Change Your Brain, and it's about neuroplasticity, this new science that I mentioned, which has to do with changing your brain, learning to control the way the neural connections, I'm sorry, the learning to control the way the neural connections in your brain are growing. I'll get it right yet. And what they've discovered is that you can do that just by paying attention. By doing certain specific mental focusing exercises, you can actually have an effect on changing your brain in very, very specific ways. So the brain can grow new connections. Now, before 1995, this was impossible. If you remember back to when you were in university studying psychology, they said that you only have a certain number of neurons in your brain. You can't grow any more connections. The brain, the neurons die out. Well, what they've discovered since 1995, so this is what John Assaraf is talking about. It's basically 15 years ago that they discovered that that's completely untrue. That our brain is continually growing new neurons, it's growing new connections, and those connections can be programmed in. And that's what we're going to be doing with these thought exercises that I'm explaining to you. So we talked about getting instant success, and how to make your results last over time is by doing these specific thought exercises, thinking about your past, thinking about your future, thinking about your present, and over time your awareness will grow. Your confidence grows, new abilities will grow, new beliefs will grow, new perceptions will grow, and over time a new reality will grow. So what Barack Obama said about we have the ability to shape the future, that's absolutely true. Each of us has the ability to shape the future the way that we want it, and part of the process is to learn to grow new neurons and new neural connections. I'm having trouble with that word. In our mind. So, let me talk now a little bit about the mind and thinking. What we know is that we have between 30 and 50,000 thoughts every day. Most of them are completely unconscious. Most of them are the same thoughts we had yesterday and last week because they're simply habits. But the question is, how do we organize those thoughts and how do we use those thoughts? Which thoughts are productive? Which thoughts are destructive? That's what we're going to be working on over the next few weeks. If there are positive thoughts that have power to help you improve the quality of your life, you want to know what those thoughts are. And you already know what some of them are. Some of them are your past successes. So the idea then of keeping a record and keeping track of your positive ideas and your powerful thoughts is the game that we're going to be playing from now on. Each of us is going to become a thought recorder. We're going to write down very specific ideas in our workbook that we have here, and we're going to start to use these ideas. When I first discovered this and I recognized the power of this, I started keeping a journal, and I've kept a journal now every day for the last 35 years or so, and I have those journals going back for three decades or more, And they're chock full of great ideas, ideas that help me and help other people. And so I want you to start thinking of the same thing. If I asked any of you to go home right now and bring me a fork, could you do it? You could do it, right? A spoon, a glass, a pair of socks. Well, depending on whose apartment you're in. Now, why can you do that? You can do it because you have a little filing system in your kitchen, and the knives go here, and the forks go here, and the spoons go here, right? That's it. If you are in business and you have an accountant, you can ask your accountant, how much money did I spend on clothes last year? Or how much money did I spend on gas? How much money did I spend on taxes in the last year? He can tell you. And the reason he can tell you is because he has a little filing system. It might be a spreadsheet. And he has these columns of expenses. And he can tell you exactly where all your money has gone because that's his job, right? So what we need to do, we need to have a filing system for our thoughts. And that's what we're going to build with these worksheets. Over the next few weeks, we're going to work on several different kinds of worksheets. And you're going to really appreciate the fact that having this little workbook set up, when you set it up, you're going to be able to use your mind in a way that maybe you've never been able to use it before because you're going to have very specific kinds of thoughts in a very specific place in that workbook. Now, there's a couple of things that the mind can do that I'm just going to mention briefly here, and we'll get back to this next week and in subsequent weeks. There's several things that the mind produces automatically. One of the things that the mind and the brain produce is language. None of you were taught your native language. A lot of people misunderstand and think that parents teach their children language. In fact, it's not true. Nobody teaches a child their native language. What happens is a child spontaneously generates language. And if they happen to be around people that speak English, they will generate English. If they happen to be around people that speak Chinese, they'll generate Chinese automatically. In fact, there have been cases where children have been raised by people who were insane and who locked the children up when they were born and kept them apart from every other person, and they were alone in a room by themselves until they were discovered at maybe the age of 10, and what they found was those children have language. They have their own language. It's perfectly grammatical, works perfectly as well as any other language, but it's unique to them because they created it themselves. So your brain creates language. Now, anybody here learn a second language as an adult? Yeah. So it's tricky, right? It takes work. I mean, when you're a child, you learn language. Boom, by the time you're 2 years old, you can speak your native language perfectly. But as an adult, you may never learn a second language perfectly. You may always have an accent. You may always make certain mistakes. And as you get older, you have to learn and practice to learn that new language. Well, another thing that your brain produces automatically, in your mind and your brain together, it produces beliefs. Everybody has beliefs. We all have beliefs. We have beliefs about our earning capacity. We have beliefs about how friendly the world is. We have beliefs about our personal power. We have beliefs about what other people are like. We have beliefs about what other people think of us. We have beliefs about how difficult it is to be successful. All of us have these kind of beliefs. So your mind automatically produces beliefs. There's nobody walking around that has no beliefs. Everybody has beliefs. But what we have to do, and what we're going to start doing over the next little while, part of the process that we're involved in, is learning how to recognize what beliefs we have that are working for us, what beliefs are empowering us, moving us ahead, and what beliefs are holding us back. And I'm going to give you some techniques to change some of those beliefs. Getting rid of negative beliefs, if you want to call them negative beliefs. Getting rid of those beliefs that are holding us back and disempowering us, and inserting into our mind more positive beliefs that will move us ahead, change our feelings, change our emotions, change our luck, change our feeling of success, change our personality. Another thing that the mind does automatically is it generates meanings. So everything that happens to you, you put a meaning on it. Oh, that means this, that means that. And again, your mind spontaneously creates meanings, and some of those meanings don't work for you, don't work for me. So we have to learn how to change the meaning of things. You lose a job. Most people say that's bad, that's a negative experience, that's a bad thing to happen. People lose their job, they get depressed. Well, then they may, 6 months later, they may find themselves in a new job, and they look back and they say, gee, you know, actually I'm glad I lost that job now, because if I hadn't lost that job, I wouldn't be in the situation I'm in now. So suddenly losing the job becomes a positive thing. So for all of us, we have the ability to change the meaning of things, to change the meaning of events in our past. And as a matter of fact, we have to do that. If we want to become empowered, if we want to develop our personal power and achieve our goals, we need to become very familiar with our thoughts, with our beliefs, and with the meaning that we have placed on things spontaneously and unconsciously, and learn to consciously change it and shift it. And the way that we do that is by what's called imprinting. And I'm going to teach you about imprinting. That's the fourth piece of this puzzle, is imprinting. And imprinting, we've all imprinted things before, so we know what imprinting is. Anybody know what 7 times 7 is? 6 times 4. 3 times 8. 11 times 6. Now, how do you know that? You know that because, exactly, repetition, repetition, repetition in school, you know. And sometimes if you went to the same school I did, you make a mistake and the nun comes over and goes, whap, you know. Ooh, pain. So this is imprinting. And this is more or less what we're going to be doing in the next little while. I'm going to teach you some techniques. They won't be painful. They'll be pretty fun and they'll be interesting. But it's a very similar thing. We're going to be repeating certain ideas, certain concepts, certain beliefs, and we're going to imprint them into our mind. And over time, what's going to happen is they're going to sink down into our subconscious and become automatic responses, so that the next time we have to figure out what 6 times 8 is, we can just go 48. Don't have to think about it. Now, another concept that I want to give you, this is the last one that I'm going to give you, and then we're going to start. I'm going to give you your thought exercises for the week, is thinking of your mind as a garden. Now, it's an old analogy. I think it goes back to the Greeks, but it's a very good analogy. It's a very powerful analogy. And the idea is that your mind will grow things. We just talked about growing language, growing beliefs, growing meanings, you know, growing knowledge. And so the idea then is that your mind is like a fertile garden, and it will produce results. It will produce automatic results. You don't have to plant anything in the ground. It'll grow all by itself. Any piece of ground you look at, you can't find a piece of ground that something's not growing in it, right? I mean, there's grass or weeds or trees or flowers or shrubs, something, right? If you clear everything out of your garden and just leave the bare earth there and come back in 6 months, guess what? It's full of stuff. There's grass, weeds, things growing there, right? So just the same as that will grow in your garden, ideas and thoughts and beliefs and experiences, because your outer world and your inner world are connected. So the beliefs and the attitudes and the ideas that are growing in your mind, positive or negative, are the things that have produced your life up to now. So thinking of your life as a garden, thinking of your mind as a garden, is a great analogy. So what we're going to be doing from now on is we're going to be doing some mental gardening. We're going to be looking at some of the weeds that are in there and getting rid of them. We're going to be planting some other thoughts, beliefs, and concepts in there. And as we imprint those and put them in, what we'll find is that our mind changes and the results that we experience out here in the world change too. That's a good point, yeah. Okay, so with that, then, I will give you, there's one other thing I want to give you, and this is the laws of the mind. There's 6 laws of the mind that we're going to be talking about. The first one is thoughts are real forces. Thoughts are forces. Like Derek de Kerkhove says, your thoughts can produce matter. So the first law of the mind, then, is that thoughts are real forces. The second law is that your mind is both a sending and a receiving station of thought. So in the same way that we send that robot to Mars, and then it sends back information, we can send our mind to a certain place in the past, it'll give us information. We can send our mind to a certain place in the future, it'll give us information. So your mind is both a sending and receiving station of thought. The third law of the mind is the law of attraction. And the law of attraction says that thoughts that are emotionalized attract more and similar thoughts. You notice when you're feeling down, you're feeling down. And the longer you feel down, the more down you feel and the more down thoughts you have. Likewise, you start to read your past successes list, you start to feel successful, and the more you play around with your past successes list, the more successful thoughts you have, and the more successes you remember. The next law is the law of control, and the law of control states that our mind is forever experiencing thoughts, but we have the ability and the power to control those thoughts. Yeah, our mind is forever experiencing thoughts, but we have the power and the ability, each of us has the power and the ability to control those thoughts. So we can control the thoughts in our mind. Clearly it takes practice, but certainly we have the potential to control our thoughts. The fifth law is the law of insertion, and the law of insertion says, I can insert any thought of any type into my mind at any time. So is it possible to have thoughts of health when you're sick? Yeah. Is it possible to have thoughts of prosperity when you're broke? Yeah. Is it possible to have thoughts of success when you're not experiencing any success physically? Yeah. As a matter of fact, that's what we have to do. We don't wait until we achieve the success before we start having successful thoughts, right? We have the successful thoughts first, and that inspires us to take control, take action, and work towards our success. And the last law, the sixth law, is the law of connection, which says that the inner world and the outer world are connected. So number one, thoughts are real forces. Number two, the mind is both a sending and a receiving station of thought. Law of attraction, thoughts that are emotionalized attract more similar thoughts. Law of control, we have the ability to control our thoughts. Number 5 is the law of insertion. We have the ability to insert any thought of any type into our mind. And number 6, the law of connection, is that the inner world and the outer world are connected. Okay, so let me give you your homework for the week, or your thought experiment for the week, because we're going to be experimenting with these. This is what we're doing now. We're going to I don't want you just to believe what I'm saying just because I'm saying it. I mean, try it out and see if it works for you. That's the only way it's going to help you, is if you actually try some of these exercises and they actually start to work for you, then you're going to realize that it's actually valid. So the first exercise I want you to do is I want you to contemplate my thoughts are real forces. So that's the first law. My thoughts are real forces. I want you to contemplate that for 5 minutes. 5 minutes every day. The next exercise is I want you to read over your past successes list, and as you think of more past successes, just add them to the list. And when you're reading your past successes list, you can use those two affirmations. One is, I feel more successful now, and the other one is, I notice more successes now. Number 5, is that 5? Okay, so the first one is my thoughts are real forces. Second one is read your past successes list and you add to it and use those affirmations. I feel more successful now and I notice more successes now. Here's another one. Exercise number 4 is going to be I'm equally connected to my past and my future. That's number 4, I think. Yeah. Yeah, number 3 is to read your past successes list, use those affirmations, and add to it. So exercise number 4 then is, I am equally connected to my past and my future. Number 5, I want you to contemplate, my power is only one thought away. And number 6, I'm now attracting more success into my life. Now, I want to demonstrate what I mean by contemplate. And so what we'll do is we'll do a little brainstorming here on this idea that thoughts are real forces. So let's think about that statement, thoughts are real forces. Anybody have any ideas about why that's true? Clay?
Everything that's been able to create as a society at one point never existed. It always first existed as a thought, and then a belief, and then...
Yeah, that's right. So everything you can see around you, from this remote control here, to the computer, to this building, to this bottle, to this book, to my suit, I mean everything started as an idea in somebody's mind. So the fact that it started as an idea and then some energy, was involved in making something. So that's one example. Anybody else have any ideas? Why thoughts are real forces? Yeah.
I think thoughts predispose you towards opportunities in your environment, and they convince those you encounter, those around you, to go with you in that direction that you have in your thoughts.
Yeah, that's true. So if you have a lot of confidence, a lot of self-belief, people tend to be attracted. People tend to follow you, right? Yeah, that's good. Any other ideas? Eric, you had a...
I think what they said is really sort of a big summation of it, because thoughts create everything. If you don't think about it, then you don't ever do anything. Without thought, nothing comes to fruition.
Okay. So that means thoughts are real forces.
Absolutely.
Leona? Okay, yeah, so thinking about, your diet, for example, or exercise, or even your health or your stress, right? When we're talking about the past successes there, I asked everybody, after you read your list of past successes, how did you feel? Everybody felt better, right? So there's a perfect example of how you think something and it has an effect on your body. We have millions of chemicals that are being produced in our brain all the time. And again, certain thoughts change the chemical balance in your mind, okay? So that's what I mean by contemplation. Now, what we just did in that little exercise, we started off with the idea thoughts are real forces. And we came up with 3, 4, 5 different examples, right? So this is what I want you to do when you're contemplating these things. You sit there, you think about it, you have a piece of paper, you have a journal, you have your workbook. So as you're thinking about, I'm more connected to my past and my future, you might remember, oh yeah, I can remember the past. if I'm planning something in the future, like a business deal, or if I want to invite a friend out for dinner, I imagine what it's going to be like to go for dinner. So thoughts are real forces, so I act on that. I call my friend up, and next thing you know, we're having dinner together just as I thought, right? So my mind is connected to the past and the future. So this is what you do. And I believe that this is the kind of exercise that they're talking about when they say that paying specific kinds of attention, focusing your mind for 5 minutes a day on a certain thought like this, will have the effect of shifting your neural connections in your brain. And that thought, which might have been a kind of a crazy idea when you first heard it, I'm connected to the past and the future equally, after a while it starts to make sense and you start to realize it's true and your mind accepts it as true. And once your mind accepts it as true, it becomes a belief for you. Once it becomes a belief and it sinks down into your unconscious mind, then it starts to be real for you, and you just start to notice it everywhere. So that's basically what we do. That's the way we do these exercises. And one more thing, Leona, yeah, you have a question? No, these ones specifically. So these specific statements, these specific beliefs. Now, there's one more part of the mind that I'm going to explain to you right now. And I learned this from a brilliant writer and a very successful teacher and business person, a good friend of mine. His name is John Kehoe. He says something that you have to understand about your mind is that your mind is the great trickster. It will trick you. And one way that it tricks you is by telling you that bad things are going to happen. You know, we'll talk more about the great trickster. But what I want to mention to you now is that the great trickster is not going to be thrilled that you are learning these mind power techniques. Your great trickster does not want you to change, because the great trickster is a part of your unconscious mind that believes that any change you make might be dangerous. So learning any new thing, trying to make any change in your life might be dangerous. So its job is to stop you from doing it. That's why when you're walking down a strange path in the forest at night, you know, you feel very uncomfortable, right? Because your mind goes, you know, it could be a bear here, there could be, you know, an animal or something here, right? So your great trickster is going to prevent you, or try and prevent you, from doing these exercises. Now, these exercises are deceptively simple, right? Just simple. We just did a couple of them right here. Pretty simple. And yet, to sit down for 20 minutes a day and spend 5 minutes thinking about this and writing down ideas why it's true, and 5 minutes about this one, and 5 minutes about that one, what I will warn you about is, quite possibly, you will find it difficult to do that. You close your eyes and you say, my thoughts are real forces, and oh, I got this presentation coming up next week at work, and I haven't got, and your mind is off, you know. So you got to say, whoops, come on back, thoughts are real forces, okay. Oh, who was that guy today that would give me the finger when I was driving down the street? You know, what a, you know, and your mind's over there now, right? So it's tricky to think about this and to focus on this and keep your mind doing this. The good part is you only have to do it for about 20 minutes. 5 minutes a day, focusing on a specific thought, specific idea like this, will have a profound effect over a period of time. And you'll notice the effects in the first week, I'm sure. But I'm just warning you that the great trickster is going to pop up and he's going to say, you know, this is a really interesting course. I mean, Anthony really sounds like he knows what he's talking about. I mean, this is really fascinating. I'm so glad I'm taking this course. But, you know, I don't really need to do these thought exercises because I already know this stuff. I mean, I read The Secret, and I read Jonathan Livingston Seagull, and, you know, I've done lots of meditation, so I don't really need to do this. I can wait until week 2 before I really get into these thought exercises. So, beware the great trickster. And that is it. So I will thank you for your kind attention, and I'll see you here next week.
You want to attend the Final 3? Then you can visit us at pinnacleevents.ca/upcoming events and attend the Final 3 sessions. I look forward to seeing you there.